Welcome back to the show, everybody. I am your host, Greg Pasta Jardula. This is here, Matt Weinglass. He is the host, too, as well, of the Homeless Left. This is the collaboration show, Homeless to Go, where Pasta to Go and the Homeless Left have come together for a day of fun, surprises, real citizen journalism, real news, not that propaganda. And we're having a hell of a time so far. It is now the top of the hour. So we do have a guest coming on, and we have a great segment for you. This is a Homeless Left segment. Let's bring in our guest to start off with, ladies and gentlemen. We have my good friend. She is an advocate, a supporter of RFK. She's done some amazing work with Julian Assange. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, Lori Spencer is with us.
Pasta, my brother. Great to see you. How are you?
Meet my friend Matt over here.
Hey, Matt. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Lori. Great to meet you and great to have you with us on our collaboration, a multi-stream live special today. We appreciate you helping out with us today and getting the insight on the campaign news, which we're going to be covering today.
Yeah, I wanted to get on a Cornel West supporter, but I couldn't find one for today. And I was like, well, I know who I got who definitely will come on the show. She thinks that she's going to get me to come on over to the dark side and vote for Mr. Kennedy. I don't know if that's the dark side nowadays when we talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Who's the dark side? It's all dark. But
I mean, hey, look at your other options.
What's that?
Look at your other options. Come on. Kennedy's the only way.
So before we get into that, I'm going to do a proper intro of the segment, and then we're going to I want to get into all of this. I can't wait to do this. Okay. So we call this campaign news. So here we go. This is campaign news update, not brought to you by Pfizer. We're here with in the studio today, the Pasta to Go studio, Homeless Left, Homeless to Go. We're with Lori Spencer with the Kennedy 24 campaign. We are talking about the campaign updates, and I want to get you guys' feedback on what's happening right now. But we're looking at the landscape, the same old. It's like we're a broken record every week. We see the same garbage from Trump, from Biden, and it gives people just no hope at all. Even first, we're going to look at how Biden is responding to the protests, because on one hand, he's saying, yeah, they have a right to protest, but not in that way. They're very dangerous. And then he's all back and forth on Hamas and this idea
they're anti-Semitic.
Yeah, the protesters are anti-Semitic. And then he's also saying we're going to back off on the funding of Israel. We're still going to do the thing, but is Rafa red line? So he's all over the place. So I just want to play one of these because I think that a lot of people are very hopeful. There's still vote blue no matter who people. They're still a little twisted, and they want so bad for Biden to keep them on and do the right thing. And I saw people tweeting out last couple of days, he's getting a heart now for the Palestinians. He's getting a heart. Well, I don't think so. When I saw this clip, let's run the clip of Biden's response right now. Here we go.
23. On a sacred Jewish holiday, the terrorist group Hamas unleashed the deadliest day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Driven by ancient desire to wipe out the Jewish people off the face of the earth, over 1,200 innocent people, babies, parents, grandparents, slaughtered in their kibbutz, massacred at a music festival, brutally raped, mutilated, and sexually assaulted. Thousands more carrying wounds, bullets and shrapnel from the memory of that terrible day they endured. Hundreds taken hostage, including survivors of the Shoah. Now, here we are, not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later. And people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas.
He looks like he's forgetting right now. Actually,
Hamas brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas who took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you, and we will not forget.
Yeah. Okay. So he looks like he's forgetting how to finish a sentence. So we have that problem. Obviously, the left's been in total denial about even the idea that he has the capacity to form a sentence. But he's all over the place on the Palestine-Israel situation, all over the place. Trump is all over the place too. We've seen last week, we covered on our show, we covered the fact that on one hand, he's like, yeah, we have to challenge the deep state. If I was president, I would never have let October 7th happen. Then he goes on Fox News, of course, calling these protesters all anti-Semitic and they're out of control and they need to be stopped, with no regard for the fact that, he's been about people with the right to get in the street and protest. So he's all over the place. I don't think the young Democrats know where to go right now. We've seen RFK Jr., and this is why I'm going to pass it over to you, Lori, in a second here. But RFK Jr., at least I got to say this. I've seen him, and we covered this also last week. He had a really strong ability to say very clearly, I am a First Amendment absolutist. I am all for protesting. And that's better, at least, than what the other two are saying. So that was something I liked hearing. But let's pass it to you. Where are you standing right now on all this, Lord? Does it seem like everybody's kind of all over the place? What lane is open right now? Where are you seeing?
Where's Bobby at?
Where's Bobby at right now on all of this from your vantage?
Sorry, I just lost my camera there for a minute. Well, you guys know this already. Yeah, good. As you well know, Bobby is a Zionist, very committed to the state of Israel's right to exist, and that will not change. The Kennedy family has a long history of support for Israel. As you know, his father was allegedly murdered by a Palestinian because he supported Israel, because he wanted to send weapons to Israel, 50 Phantom jets. And that is reportedly what set Sirhan Sirhan into a murderous rage. Before that, President Kennedy was the first U.S. president to sell arms to Israel. Truman and Eisenhower had always been very prickly about that. They wanted to maintain good relations with those oil-rich Arab states, and they didn't want to antagonize the Arabs. But, JFK had traveled to Palestine before it was Israel. He went there in 1939, went there again in 1951. He himself committed Zionist and actually started our special relationship with Israel. So it's a long family tradition, and I like to point that out to people who think that Bobby Kennedy, they must have something on him. He's owned by the Zionist lobby, blah, blah, blah. Not true. It's just a family tradition. It's a sincerely held belief that he has. You might think he's misguided, but that's what he believes. At the same time, he's also very pro-Palestinian. He says that he stands with the Palestinian people, whom he believes are enslaved by Hamas, and that the only thing for Israel to do is to finish this war and to finish Hamas. He does believe in a two-state solution. I personally disagree with that. I don't think it's workable. It's never been workable. And if you look at the opinion polls in both Palestine and Israel today, the vast majority in both states just don't want that. So I don't see how the United States or even the international community can force that two-state solution on two parties that clearly don't want it. Who are we to come in and dictate the terms? And that is true of a two-state solution. And I think it's also true of Israel's war. I don't really think that it's our place to tell them how to wage their war, but that's what the Biden administration is doing, which has alienated a lot of pro-Zionists. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. A Zionist is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as anyone, Jew, non-Jew, who simply believes that Israel has the right to exist as a nation state. I don't really see why that's so controversial, but apparently it is. But, it's really not our place to do that, in my opinion.
Yep. Well, let me give you a little pushback, Miss Spencer,
Sure.
my good friend over there. And I love having these
I love
conversations
it. Pushback.
All right. So, first of all, there's a lot of people who, including, I believe, Bobby himself, admitted that it's a very strong possibility that Sirhan Sirhan was a MK Ultra experiment. In other words, he was, MK Ultra, which if you don't know what that is, it's a CIA program where they did a lot of testing with mind controls. It was spawned out of the testing from the Nazis during the Holocaust on people and how we can control them, get inside their heads. I think A Clockwork Orange has a scene that's very indicative or very similar to what an MK Ultra plan would be, holding up the guy's eyes, opening and programming them. So we have that. There's also the argument that David Ben-Gurion, who was one of the first prime ministers of Israel, actually resigned because of a series of letters from JFK. And that was at a time where it seemed that the United States had more of control of what was going on in the land of occupied Palestine or Israel, whatever you want to call it. But JFK had gotten David Ben-Gurion to resign. And there were also reports that, David Ben-Gurion, with his relationship with the Mossad and eventually the Mossad, executed JFK, that they had a bigger upper hand in it, even more than the mom. These are just theories out there, right?
I know.
That also,
they're crazy, though, just crazy. I'm a JFK assassination buff and been studying that case for 40 years.
I will say this much: that
there's just no evidence to support that.
There is some evidence. We talk about Cuba, right? And we talk about a lot of people not happy that JFK didn't want to support the air of the Bay of Pigs, the air supply, the air raids, the air support for that. The mobster who had the most invested inside Cuba wasn't even Italian. It wasn't Lucky Luciano. It was Meyer Lansky, a Jewish guy. Ties to the Mossad, ties to the state of Israel. And to hear him throw out the Hamas this, Hamas that, Hamas this, Hamas that. There are reasons for a person like myself, because I believe Bobby is way too smart. He's got so many great issues that we could talk about. His pushing back about real climate issues out here, about real dirty of water, about what do you call them? When you use for your food, the bad parts about food. What are they? GMOs, right? GMOs. This is an area where Bobby talks about food sovereignty, where he's above and beyond. When he talks about SSRIs and all these mass shootings, how the big pharma, the part they had to play, and also the whole COVID situation, right? So there are people out there who think that Bobby is way too smart to get this wrong. And I just like to say, at the end of the day, no matter what, I'm sorry, Larry, where I really disagree with you is this is not Israel's war. Israel's war is our war. They take our weapons, they take our funding. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is there are reasons to believe where people can say, hey, Bobby is compromised here. They often talk about the Ghislaine Maxwell on the jet and whatnot. But what do you say to the pushback to those people out there? As you explained, his position is his position, where it comes from the history and whatnot. But a lot of people do feel that it is a compromisation. Your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I think it's a bunch of bullshit. I'm not going to lie. As you admit, Bobby is right about so many things. So would it be so much of a stretch to think that maybe he's right about Israel too? I know that's going to upset some people. But if you really listen to him, and a lot of people that I personally know who were once very anti-Israel and pro-Palestine, but they support Bobby, they started listening to what he's actually saying, and they started investigating the history for themselves, and they came to realize and agree with him that he's right.
So I
would encourage you to do the same.
We want to believe. I'll say this just to update some of the listeners and followers that haven't been following the Homeless Left for the last year. We've been on Rumble for a year, and we started the show championing RFK Jr. We championed him from the first moment we started this show. We didn't call this campaign news update. We called it RFK Jr. news update. And we changed it later to campaign news. I'm going to tell you, Lori, and people watching, why we made that adjustment and when that happened. And when that happened was, we were so excited in early October, end of September. We knew something big was happening. He was finally going to do the thing that Bernie Sanders refused to do, and that's actually stand up to the Democratic Party. So we were thrilled. And as starting off our show, we were like, we're going to Philly. We're going to cover this. We're going to be there when he says F you to the whole system and be a real anti-war candidate and be against everything he talked about, the big pharma, all this big food, everything we've gone through, all the stuff he's been right about. We're like, he's going to do the thing Bernie was unable to do. And what happened 3 days before that October 10th announcement, and we'd already, obviously, we went to Philly. We were there, and we booked we booked everything. We're there. Something was a little off in the air when we got there, and a lot of that was because, as you guys know, the timeline, the dates. October 7th happened 3 days before.
Yeah,
and I have to go back to this,
and that just changed everything.
It did.
Now let me.
I was saying that day really quickly. I was saying, please. Somebody get Bobby's phone. Take it out of his hand. Don't let him tweet. Don't let him tweet.
That would have been an excellent move.
Oh, but he did.
Now he did tweet, and I go back to this tweet, and I can't not go back to it because I look at this from a point of view as principle, and so we can talk about theories of JFK. We can go all day on JFK, and we can go all day on his father as well. But
yes.
Right now, and also all of the influence. We can talk about AIPAC all day long about influence of the entire Congress, the entire political system in DC. These are things that we could have long discussions about. But I'd like to start from the point of principle. When you say, and I'm going to ask you this, Lloyd, when you say no red line to a leader, doesn't even have to be Netanyahu, it could be anybody. You say no red line for an unprovoked attack. To me, you're saying two things. You're saying there's a situation that exists where there will be no accountability. There's a situation that exists where we will not look into historical context and we'll start from the moment that this thing happened on the 7th. When you put those two things out there, there's a precedent being set that in this world that we live in, that we're okay, that situationally we will give a leader no accountability, nothing. And when I saw that, without being a total scholar at the time of the history, I wanted to know the history, and it seemed like he didn't. I wanted to say, wait a second, even if there is some sort of redemption that needed to happen or some sort of retribution need to happen here, how could you say that? If you said that against George Bush, or you said that to George Bush and Dick Cheney, would we be considered anti-patriotic to say you can't say that? You can't say no red line on the terrorism campaign? It's like, so for my question, then I'm sorry to take so long on this, but I'm going to pass it to you now, Lori. My question is, if someone's willing to do that and they're running as a candidate that's supposed to be against the establishment as an anti-war candidate, how can you make sense of that? How can you put that circle in the square? Please explain to me how that can how those two things can be true at the same time. Is he an anti-war candidate if he's giving no red line policy to any leader?
That's a great question. And it's been asked a lot since October the 7th because Bobby was against the war in Iraq. He was against the war in Afghanistan. He was against the Vietnam War. He's been consistently anti-war all of his life. The way that he answers that question when he's asked is that he doesn't believe that there has been a justified war since World War II. I agree. I don't think that he says that no war of the 20th century except World War II was a justified war. Fascism was an enemy that had to be destroyed. It was just too evil to be allowed to thrive and survive. I agree. When he's asked about the Gaza war, he argues that it is a just war, that Israel has been consistently attacked ever since Hamas came to power back in 2005. It is true that Israel funded Hamas, encouraged Hamas, hoping that they could buy peace with their neighbors. They had hopes that maybe this two-state solution thing would work. But at every turn, Hamas has refused. At every turn, Hamas has broken ceasefires. There were 5 ceasefires in place prior to October the 7th. What they did on October the 7th, invading Israel's borders, coming into the kibbutzim, which is, by the way, the most leftist, damn near communist part of Israel. Those people are as far left peaceniks as you can get. Those are the people who believed in a two-state solution. Those are the people who consistently went into Gaza, had friends in Palestine, brought them over to Israel for medical treatment and jobs and employed them. And they were the first to be slaughtered. Peace activists, people who honestly tried to forge friendships with the Gazans. And that was how they were repaid for their kindness. Bobby strongly feels that kind of evil that we saw in the October 7th attack cannot go unanswered and cannot be allowed to thrive in this world. He sees it like I see it. He knows the Nazi history of Palestine dating back to before World War II, when the Palestinians, the Arabs of Palestine, forged an alliance with Nazi Germany, and they were very committed Nazis. To be consistent, if we say that the Nazis in Ukraine are bad and that the influence of Stefan Bandera continues in Ukraine to this very day, we also have to be intellectually and historically honest and acknowledge the Arab-Nazi collaboration in World War II, the continuing influence of Hitler. Mein Kampf is still a bestseller in the West Bank and in Gaza. They literally have clothing stores in Gaza City called Hitler 1 and Hitler 2, and they say he's the greatest thing ever. So, these are true facts, and we have to acknowledge them. So the continuing influence of Nazism is there in the Palestinian Liberation Movement, in Hamas, which is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood, of course, was allied with the Nazis in World War II. Haj Amin al-Hassani, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, mentored his cousin Yasser Arafat in the 1950s and taught him everything that he knew. The PLO was literally trained by former Nazi soldiers who escaped prosecution from Nuremberg in Egypt. They changed their names. They got new passports. They took Arabic names. Some converted to Islam, and they joined Egypt and the Palestinian forces in the 1948 war when they invaded Israel. So it's a long, complex history. But Mr. Kennedy feels the short version of the answer is he feels that Israel is fighting a justified war and that they have no choice but to smash Hamas, because if they don't, Hamas will be back again and again and again. And Hamas has told us that they intend to do it again and again and again. They're not making any secret of it.
He might really believe that. I don't know if he really, I hear Pasta saying he's too smart to think that. I might think he might actually believe that. But either way, doesn't it make you curious, Lori, that you have a guy who, again, back to the I'm an anti-war candidate, I'm challenging the Democratic Party. How can that sit well with you and the entire campaign that you're basically saying that Biden got Ukraine wrong, but got Israel right? The money's going to both. You're saying he's 100% wrong on one and 100% right on the other. How do you make sense of that if Kennedy is supposed to be challenging the entire establishment and where they're funding all of their diabolical schemes to annihilate different places and steal resources, no matter what country they're doing it in? And
I will argue too, really quickly, Lori, just as a little cherry on top of what he just said, that you can't be an anti-war candidate if you're going to be for the pro-Zionist state, because it spins out of control. It then goes to Iran, the situation with Iran. And we saw this with the rhetoric, and then it goes into China and Russia and even Venezuela, mentioning the Venezuelan regime. It's a Bobby just to support Israel that spins out of control. And then we'll address all the other stuff you said before, because the second part of that is, number one, how can you be an anti-war candidate if you're going to be in this lane over here? But number two is, despite, let's just say for argument's sake, that everything you just talked about with the history of Palestinians and their relationship to the Nazis is true. I don't believe a lot of that, what you said, but let's say it is true.
Look it up.
Okay, wait 1 second. Regardless, let's say if it's true or not, how could you still justify the bombing of so many women and children and civilians in the Gaza Strip? Go ahead.
How could I justify it, or how does Mr.
How can
Kennedy
anybody justify that, even if they're true about the history, they're right about the history? So
right. Well, a couple of things. As far as the war in Gaza, it's really not America's war. A point that I've been making as I watch the protests on college campuses, I wonder to myself, where were you guys for the last 2.5 years? When we had this huge war in Europe, and you don't seem to be concerned about that. Where are the huge anti-war protests against the war in Ukraine, which is the war that threatens to spiral out of control into World War III and the war that's most likely to bring American troops into it. You know, there are all these comparisons being made now to 1968, to the anti-Vietnam War protests. And there's a huge difference, though. Back then, college students were not so much protesting the war as they were protesting the draft. They didn't want to go fight that war. They thought it was an illegal, unjust war. And they wanted nothing to do with it. So they were really protesting the draft. They had skin in the game. This war, what puzzles me about it and why I see these young college students getting so up in arms about it, I wonder, why are you so concerned about this little war over here, 5,000 miles away, where we don't have American soldiers? There's very little danger that we will ever send American troops into that war. It's Israel's war. We support our ally, as you might expect.
Let me answer that
question. Where were you guys on Ukraine? Where's the outrage about that? And
I'm going to answer that question I'm going to answer that question, Lori, with a very simple line written. I'm going to attribute this to Caitlin Johnstone, huge anti-war activist, journalist, reporter on Twitter, Australian reporter on Twitter. She wrote on April 12th, and this should answer everything you just asked. Gaza is simpler than Iraq. Iraq was simpler than Yemen. Yemen was simpler than Libya. Libya was simpler than Ukraine. Ukraine is simpler than Syria. Gaza is the simplest and most straightforward of all the evil interventions of the U.S. murder machine in recent memory, which is why I've got no patience for anyone who gets it wrong. That might explain why the kids, the students, the younger generation are in the streets, because it's not as complicated to understand. We understand it here because we know every one of those conflicts and we can talk about them in great detail. But if you're wondering why the younger generation had enough, it's because this one is as clear as day. They can see it. They don't have to know all of this other stuff.
I would also argue too as well that there is a woke element here, that, you know, Ukraine, Russia has a lot of white people dying, you know, and in Israel, Palestine, there are a lot of brown people dying.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy for a lot of people in the woke movement to kind of say, who cares about a bunch of Russians? You can see a lot of Democrats, they're very easily pushing back against Russia. You know, when it comes
to the Ukrainians? Ukrainians are getting killed too. Supposedly we care about them, but
500,000 of them.
Where's that anti-war protest? We had Rage Against the War Machine, right? Last year. That's really the only one of any size that mattered. We didn't even have one this year. And still the killing goes on and on and on. We're talking more than half a million dead in the Russia-Ukraine war. Are we going to be consistently anti-war here? I mean, that's the question you're asking me. So I'm kind of kicking it back to you.
Well, right. We are trying to be consistent, and we should try educating the students in the streets right now, letting them know that it's not just this conflict. It's all the ones that Caitlin Johnstone mentioned. We should be on that side. You should be with us, Lori, as we try and help them understand these other ones that might be a little more complicated to understand. But this one this one is easy. You can see it happening in real time without having to know all the history. Like in Ukraine, I mean, we know about the Minsk agreement. We know about breaking this treaty. We know about the Kiev situation. We know about all this stuff that went down, Zelensky being a puppet. We have to kind of piece it together. It takes a little more brain power, a little more concentration to look at that. But these kids, what they see every day on their phones, they just whip out your phone. You can see these kids and women getting annihilated.
There's no my friend is the problem. That, my friend, is the problem.
The problem is that they have access to the visuals, the information, and the stories from the ground. They shouldn't have that access.
No. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm saying that there is a very skillful and well-funded propaganda operation that Hamas and Iran and their allies are running on American social media and social media worldwide to besiege young minds with these horrible images that are, of course, supposed to provoke the appropriate emotional response in you. Because no one wants to see a baby killed. Nobody wants to see people slaughtered like this. What I would argue is all of those billions and billions of dollars that the international community so graciously and generously gave to the Palestinian people over the last several decades only went to the leaders of Hamas. They're all billionaires. They don't set foot in Gaza. They live in penthouses protected by armed guards, living the high life while their people suffer. And when Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th and did what they did, regardless of what you believe they did or didn't do, the bottom line is they knew that there would be a response from Israel, right? They've been dealing with Israel for years. They knew that Israel was going to bomb the shit out of them. Did they build one bomb shelter to protect their people? With all that money that we gave them, do you really think that Hamas gives a about the Palestinian people? They don't. They absolutely do not. Instead, they were busy building terror tunnels underground for rockets instead of providing a reliable water supply, leaving it to Israel to provide the people of Gaza with water at Israel's own expense. The whole, open air prison thing is really, let's be honest, Egypt's border is closed to the Palestinians. Every other Arab country is closed to the Palestinians. Ask yourself why they're still not taking in.
Well, I will. Yeah. Okay. I'll push back about this one. The neighboring countries that are right there on the border, other than Lebanon, who's taken on a lot of Palestinian refugees, are pro-U.S. Jordan, Egypt's client states. At the end of the day, look, Lori, I know we could probably argue this one till the cows come home, and I don't know how much time we got you today. Me personally, I would have just taken the stance of like, Bobby's wrong on this, but he's right on so many issues. I would go and say I would do the collateral damage. I would weigh it in there. What options do we really have? I think when we talk about him being the third candidate, he is the third candidate. I disagree with all the areas of when it comes to Israel Palestine, but I know we have you for a limited time. So instead of us talking in circles about this right now, because I know we could do that, I want you to tell me, Lori, an area in which you think that Bobby really needs to get a lot more attention on outside the Israel-Palestine situation. What areas are worth going to vote, to getting up on the polls on election day and going to vote for RFK? Where does he stand out now that we're at this point? And you have a video you said about, right?
What I want to do is show the tweet, because this happened, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get that up. This is his olive branch, I think, to Trump, trying to get a debate.
Yeah, which I think he's always been smart about. I think he's been smart about it. Listen, the campaign has been really smart about how they go about this, not separating themselves. It's always been clear that Bobby was not going to be Trump's running mate. He said that, right? But I think he's been smart, the campaign, to align themselves, knowing that he gets some of those. I mean, for me, the whole COVID era, when it came to Bobby Kennedy and what he did, I mean, it was like he was the leader. He was out there in front. He was a little bit dragging his feet in the beginning. He got some things wrong, but he got things right very quickly. I was in D.C. covering the speech at the first Defeat the Mandates, and it was electrifying, and it meant so much. It talked about censorship, what we're facing today. Let's throw this tweet up there. Let's see this olive branch. I want to get Mrs. Spencer's opinion on it and things. And we won't agree on Israel-Palestine, but she looks really cool today with this hair over here. She looks like she's doing a Queen cover band, or what's the name of the band? It was a Queen, right there. Very much. So what does this say over here? Make this nice and big. Can we
see if
you can make it big?
Let's see if I can
put my glasses on. Put my seeing eye glasses on. Yeah. There we go.
Did it get a little bigger now?
All right. So what's he say over here? We'll read this to you, and then we'll get your opinions on this.
We'll just start at the top here. So dear President Trump, I'm grateful to you for calling attention to the rigged polling methodologies that biased DNC-influenced media have used against you. We have this concern too, and I'm happy to show you the deceptive methodologies used by DNC-allied pollsters who pretend that I'm in single digits. You have correctly characterized these as fake polls. This is why we did our own poll with Zogby, the largest and most accurate poll of this election cycle. We had Zogby ask about head-to-head matchups. So he goes through the next ones. I'll get down to the bottom part. So he's basically going through why he now should be validated enough by Trump, who previously said that he wasn't going to engage with RFK Jr. until he got a certain amount of numbers. So we're going to let me get down to the end here. So you yourself had said, you are not afraid to debate me as long as my poll numbers are, so as long as they're decent. So he's proved that with this particular poll. Well, they are, in fact. I'm the only presidential candidate in history who has polled ahead of both major party candidates in head-to-head races. So let's meet at the Libertarian Convention and show the American public that at least two of the major candidates aren't afraid to debate each other. I asked the convention. Oh, he even went to do that. I asked the convention organizers, and they're game for us to use our time to bring the American people the debate they deserve. Sincerely, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. What are your thoughts, Lori, on this tweet? And is this going to be effective? What do you think? How do you think Trump and people are going to respond to this?
Well, I've been a libertarian for 30 years, friends. I left the Democratic Party in 1996. And I never looked back, and I have no regrets. So I am thrilled to see the Libertarian Party able to get not only President Trump to come to their convention and give a speech. That's a huge get, but also Robert Kennedy. And yes, they could just do their respective speeches, but hey, while you're in the same town, at the same convention, at the same time, why not hash it out? It would be a great debate. And I like that Bobby threw down the gauntlet and said, hey, let's do this, Trump. Got some tough questions for you. And Trump's response to that was, we'll see how you're doing in the polls, Bobby. You're still small time. Let's get those poll numbers up a little bit before we have a debate, which is his way of chickening out. Okay, you guys know Trump. He talks a good game, but when it comes right down to it, when challenged, he runs. And he's running, I believe, from this debate with Bobby Kennedy because he knows that Bobby's going to challenge him on the lockdowns. He's going to ask President Trump for answers about Operation Warp Speed. And perhaps the one question that President Trump really does not want to face is when Bobby Kennedy asks him, why didn't you declassify and release all of those CIA files about the murder of my uncle when you promised that you would? Look in my eyes, Mr. Trump. Look in my face and answer that question.
Would RFK be willing to add Cornel West or Jill Stein to that debate? Because those people really, they have to share the same views on Israel-Palestine as I do, right? And there are people in the audience, why didn't you push back more and whatnot? I'm trying to have conversations. We don't agree. We're not going to agree on this situation, but
we can still love each other and disagree on some things.
We can. And, to be honest with you, it's like, I've lost. I won't vote for Bobby Kennedy. I said this before. I just can't do it. This issue when it comes to Israel Palestine. Listen. However, I'm sensing what's going on out there. The poll numbers are rising. Bobby Kennedy still seems to get enough support from people in the United States, despite his awful views on Israel-Palestine, in my personal opinion. So therefore, as a news person, I have to pay attention to it. I have to have people on like Laurie Spencer to talk about this. And I wish you would have pushed back more. We could sit here and we could spend all day pushing back on this.
We could do the whole 5 hours just on the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Easily.
I'm trying to see why, and if there is legitimacy for people going out and supporting him despite those. Not for me, no, but other people out there have obviously spoken, and I have to listen to them. But would Bobby, do you think he would take on a Jill Stein or a Cornel West and discuss those issues where he knows that he has lost some support from some of his supporters when it comes to Israel-Palestine? Do you think he'd be willing to do that?
I do. I absolutely think that he should debate Dr. Stein and Dr. West. Now, I don't know if the Libertarian Convention is the right place to do it because very few libertarians align with their views, right? I think perhaps the better forum for that debate would be the Free and Equal debates that Christina Tobin is doing. And I work with Free and Equal. Going to be involved in the debates coming up this summer. Of course, Bobby Kennedy's invited, and he should be there because he is the leading independent presidential candidate. And I think that that would be the perfect forum for him to have that conversation with a lot of the Libertarian and Green Party and other independent candidates. But as far as Dr. Stein and Dr. West at the Libertarian Convention, Craig, Could you imagine the kind of response they would get from the libertarians?
No, I don't even know. Like, listen, I don't even know if Cornel West would even jump in that.
I doubt that.
And I don't know where he's at. You know, there were a bunch of people on the left who really kind of demonized us for coming together with our libertarians. And it was the libertarian people out there that we could depend on. They said they used to depend on us to be anti-war, but now the Democratic Party has been full-blown pro-war. We talked about the inconsistency when they're all about, you know, stopping the genocide in Israel, but nothing about the killing in the Ukraine. In fact, they endorsed it, every single Democrat. So there is something legitimacy there. But they ridiculed us for working with libertarians. They did. We are able to go, way to go, Scott Horton. Way to go, Dave Smith. Way to go, Clint Russell, to being anti-war and stuff like that. I don't even think that Dr. Cornel West would say, no, he wouldn't put past the stuff we heard from the Code Pink people that said the libertarians are racist and therefore we can't do an event with them, regardless or not if we're trying to stop World War III.
We know that Dr. Stein would show up. She was at Rage Against the War Machine. She was there. She got a great response. We actually got, was one of the first interviews we got with the homeless left was a year ago in DC with Jill Stein. So she was, so there's something there with her. I happen to, I think with Cornel West,
she has challenged Bobby recently to a debate on the Gaza war, which would be great. Yeah, I'd like to see that happen.
Where was she on COVID? Where was she pushing back again when the Black Caucus was asking for a life support raft when they were saying, hey, listen, we're not standing with the steering committee's opinions on COVID right now. They were going full-blown censorship, full-blown fascism. Where was Jill Stein at? She was nowhere to be found. She still has a close connection to Peter Dow. And what's that all about? So, I mean, I am not a big Jill Stein supporter, but yeah, I mean, she's good on this one issue. But those people have to be aware of where they were at when they were locking down the whole country and forcing us all into the poverty hole, right? And just cutting us off, cutting off all small business and whatnot. They were nowhere to be found.
I know it's your show, but can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I have to ask. I've never understood single issue voting. Perhaps you can explain to me, when I know that you agree with RFK on most of his positions, why would you let a war going on 5,000 miles away that the United States doesn't have troops involved in, very unlikely to have troops involved in, why would you base your vote just on that one issue instead of issues that directly impact the United States?
Because it's a big issue. It's about genocide. It's about ethnic cleansing. And like I said before, I don't believe that Bobby is misguided on this or just wrong. I do feel there is some form of compromisation. And when you talk about the Israeli lobbyists, you talk about AIPAC, they're some of the strongest lawmaking lobbyists out there. So if you get this wrong, it just spins out of control. Then, like I said, then you have issues with China. You have issues with Iran. You have issues with eventually Russia, Venezuela. And this is the rhetoric. So, I mean, to me, this issue was just too big. It gets at the crux of what we do. This is the imperialism that we need to stop. So that's why it's going to, and listen, this is hurtful because you know where I stand on COVID, right? You understand, you know, I spoke at Defeat the Mandates in LA, the second one. I was one of the MCs. I was out in front when it came to ivermectin. I love what Bobby was talking about. I love his talk about SSRIs, how big pharma, you know, with all these medications. Like we talk about the fentanyl issue. Who created the patients? Who created the users? It was big pharma. It's not the Chinese or the cartels. Bobby understands this. He understands when it comes to our food sovereignty. Bobby even understands when it comes to the border, and he doesn't lead on it, but when I've asked him before, and there's a video on there when it comes to all these regime change operations, these interventions in Latin America, how much of a role do we have to play for the cause of migration to the border? Bobby understands this. So this is a hurtful thing there, Lori, when he's so good on so many issues.
Also, I know an issue that you care about so much is Julian Assange. And
on day one,
leading presidential candidates, he's the only one who will pardon Julian and save his life. And that's one of those single issues that, you know, if I didn't already agree with Bobby on everything, I'd vote for him just for that one thing alone.
That one thing is an important thing. Though. This is a big issue.
He's correct on the Ukraine war too. I think you agree with his position on that. So I guess, it baffles me. It mystifies me that the war in Europe is the one that threatens to draw United States troops and our young people into it as it continues to expand. And that war doesn't show any signs of stopping. It's a quagmire at this point, with neither side making significant gains. It's a meat grinder. They're running out of Ukrainians, and so now they're sending in the French and maybe the British, and then it's our turn.
Maybe the Americans, according to Hakeem Jeffries, right?
Yes. So my question to you is, if this war in Gaza is over by November, Israel says they're done once they're finished with Rafah, then it's over. Hamas is smashed, and they start working on the day after. Americans have a pretty short memory, as you know. The latest thing right now is free Palestine. But if it ends tomorrow, by November, most Americans are going to forget all about that war. Would you change your vote? And would you vote for Bobby?
I think, let me come back in on this, because you had asked that previous question, Lori, about the single issue voter. And I don't consider myself a single issue voter. I'm a principled voter. And it was very difficult for me back in October 10th, being in Philadelphia and watching this man stand up there and say, we are taking back our independence. And to me, that, I reflected on it. I didn't just, knee-jerk reaction. I really had to sit with it. And when we got back to LA and we kept the show going here, I sat with it, and I realized that that's not that the principle to me is about declaring independence. That I don't think we can see that happening with Bobby right now. He's not actually declaring his independence. And so this is not a one issue a situation. This is a pull back the curtain moment. If anything, October 7th was a pull back the curtain moment for a lot of people, for a lot of the younger generation. They're in the streets now. And the reason they took this long to get in the streets, I want to tell people this, they believed that their administration, the adults in the room, as we call it, that they said, get that child out of there, get that orange man out of there, and put the adults in the room. Well, they did that. They listened to what they were told, got them in the room. They let 6 months go, and they said, you know what? They're going to figure this out. They're going to do the right thing. Didn't happen. Well, they're pissed, and they're like, this isn't one issue. This is a pull back the curtain moment. And I will go off of Martin Luther King Jr., who warned us a year before his assassination. He said, my work here at home doesn't mean anything if we cannot stop the military industrial complex. He warned his supporters. He said, I can't ignore. They told him, just stay in your lane. Just stay in your lane, man. You're the civil rights dude. Don't be doing this anti-war stuff. That's not you. He's like, I can't be effective with what is important here if we're allowing this massive entity, to control all of the foreign policy, all of the domestic policy. Everything's connected to this, Lori. So I'd say this is a principal thing for me. And I know, even if everything worked itself out tomorrow, it still doesn't take away the part that all the politicians are in the pockets of the biggest lobbyists in the planet. I mean, there has to be something done about that. If anything, this woke that up to me, and that's why that's important to me. It's a principled issue, not a single issue.
And it's Lori, really quickly too, though. I just want to reiterate, though, that Lori did mention too as well, and this is something I struggle with. There are so many other issues that Bobby Kennedy is just way beyond on anything. I mean, Donald Trump is still praising the vaccine, this Operation Warp Speed guy. I mean, this is still going on. There, we talk about, the SSRIs. We talk about understanding Latin America. There's so many other issues, Lori, but I'm still in Matt's camp over here. I can't. And listen, I don't want you to stop trying to convince me over here. It might not happen. I don't. Okay. It's not going to happen. But it might not happen. I should say, to keep you going. But don't stop trying to convince me over here. But there are reasons why it's hard for me to pull the trigger on Bobby, despite all these things. Because this.
Did you have to put it that way, Craig? Pull the trigger.
What? Love your hair, by the way.
Oh man.
What's your favorite Heart song? Let us know. Come on.
Barracuda.
Barracuda.
Ooh, Barracuda.
But go ahead and respond to what Matt and I just said over there, as far as, we about being the one issue voter too, because this is really a quagmire. I think, I've spoke to people in this business over here that have said, oh man, and I don't want to mention his name, but he's like, it was such a letdown with his position over here on Israel Palestine. By the way, at 4:20 today, we just got confirmed to guest Patrick Henningsen will be closing out the show with us.
Oh, great!
Today. So we got Patrick Henningsen to come on and talk about that too today as well. But I mean, this is such a hard issue, and you have a hard time trying to convince everybody, but it is just so hard when it comes to the Israeli-Palestine situation. Please continue.
Well, I did want to point out, just to respond, that Dr. Martin Luther King was a committed Zionist and very supportive of Israel. Took a strong stand against anti-Semitism. And guys, I come from the left. Even though I'm a libertarian, I'm a leftist libertarian.
Me too.
For all of my life, all of my heroes were friends of Israel. They were Zionists. Dr. Martin Luther King, the Kennedys, all of the people that I looked up to, indeed supported Israel, very strongly. And it's one of the reasons why I believe as I do. And I also believe as I do because I'm a historian and I've spent years and years with my nose in history books looking at this very complex issue in the Middle East. And believe me, it's much more complex than you can get in a brief TikTok video or a podcast. You really have to spend years of your life studying it. But I will say that, the left, the liberals, always, until pretty recent years, were always supportive of Israel. All of the great civil rights people in the movement back then, the white kids that were out there marching in Selma, the attorneys representing those who were jailed and hurt in the protests down south, they were Jews, by the way. They were Zionists. The civil rights movement was a coalition of Jews and blacks.
Abby Hoffman. Yeah.
And of course, many of the great radicals of the 60s anti-war movement were Jews, Zionist Jews. The principled position of the left until recent years was always that we stood with Israel. And so Bobby is no different from the people of his time and place. And that certainly had an influence on me as well. But again, I don't think that it would influence my vote one way or the other, because I'm far more concerned about the war in Europe. That's the one that threatens to engulf us all. And just this week, we saw President Putin, saying we're going to do some tactical nuclear tests. Hello, United States. Hello, world. Hello, Britain. How would you like to poke the Russian bear some more? I'd be much more worried about that war if I were you guys. I'm just saying.
Well, it's almost the top of the hour, so we have to wrap it up. I want to thank Lori Spencer for coming on. She's under the gun over here. She had two people who disagree strongly with her on the Israel-Palestine situation. But
Thank you for being nice. Thank you for being kind to me. I love.
I'm not going to
be strange bedfellows.
Yeah, I'm not going to suppress any type of voice out there too as well. Like I said, Lori, I think you're wrong about this whole situation. You have a hard task in front of you, but I love you just the same. I appreciate what you're doing with Maverick News. And, like I said, it is hard, and it's really disappointing to me to try to concentrate on some of the areas where Bobby just stands alone. I mean, he just stands alone on a lot of issues out there. However, it's up to that person if they want to make the decision or not. Is this issue worthy of still turning a blind eye and voting for him, or is it a no-go because of it? I'm a no-go because of it. But out there, like I said, I appreciate everybody having the conversations. And if we continue to censor people and shut them up and shut them down and not listen to them, we're going to get nowhere. So thank you so much, Lori Spencer. And Matt, if you got anything to say for Miss Spencer before we let her advertise her links and where people can find her, please.
Thank you, Lori, for being with us, doing campaign news update. It was such a treat having a friendly debate like this. I think it does get the viewers and people also thinking about stuff, and they're talking with each other right now. I know that. We want you guys to take these conversations with you, to friends, families, colleagues, and keep that going. We should always be engaging with each other and having friendly discourse and holding each other accountable too. So we appreciate you coming on and doing that.
And by the way, you said Barracuda. For me, my song is "What About Love." What about love? That's
I'm an 80s kid. I love that one. And I know that ballot access is something really important to you. You're an election integrity guy, Pasta, and I just wanted to tell you that today is a happy day for me because we just got Bobby on the ballot in the great state of Oklahoma, where I am. We just went to the state capitol this morning and filed the paperwork, so it's official. And he's now on the ballot in 5 states officially. We have plenty of petition signatures ready to go for 8 more states. So that's a grand total of 13. And we still have a long way to go, but we're going to be announcing more and more states every week as we go on until August. So Bobby is going to be on the ballot in probably all 50 states or damn close to it. So that's why it's so important. And that's why I came on to dialogue with you today. Even though we can have a fierce debate about Israel and Palestine, I would implore you to remember that this is our chance, our one chance in my lifetime, in your lifetime, to actually break the two-party duopoly, to elect an independent president. You may not agree with him on everything, but I guarantee you he'll negotiate a more peaceful and just solution to the Middle East crisis than Donald Trump or Joe Biden will. That I can promise you. So
Lori
thank you
Spencer,
so much.
Maverick News, supporter of RFK, friend of the show. Thank you so much. We disagree, but we can have these great conversations, and I thank you so much for coming on, Lori.
We agree that we want peace. I'm with you on that.
For sure.
Always.
Thank you,
Thank you, guys.
Lori Spencer, ladies and gentlemen.